Welcome to the Learning Lab. My name is Roman Garcia. This is volume 7. This is a continuance of a progressive treatment of a patient who recently fell. If you've seen volume 7A and B, you'll be aware of what the topic of this volume is, and that is whether to use heat or cold. And we've been following the progression of this patient using basically heat as the energy that we've been driving into the tissue. And just to familiarize again the folks out there with the cases, that this patient about 3 weeks ago, she fell on an uneven threshold and she traumatized her hip. She developed a large mass on the side of the hip, and she developed bruising along the whole lateral side of the left hip. And we've been treating this patient. This treatment would be the third treatment of this progressive treatment that we've been giving this patient. And we basically, like I said before, we've basically been using heat and ultrasound as the energies that we've been driving into the tissues. Now, the point of this video is to demonstrate the effectiveness of heat and what it does in the tissues when the therapist or when the medical examiner or the practitioner uses heat on traumatized tissue. What heat does biologically, what heat does physiologically. So we're continuing with this educational series on the use of heat and what its effect are on the biology of the tissue. So what I did, and continuing this educational series, is I've been progressing along biologically and physiologically on the effects of heat, using certain physical principles and biological principles. The next level is this that I wrote here, and this is I try to simplify it as much as possible. But in essence, what we do is that when somebody uses heat, they're using the simplest form of energy that an individual can use to direct energy at a traumatized tissue. In effect, heat has kind of a regenerative effect on tissue. And the way that it does it physically is this. When somebody uses heat on their bodies, basically what the heat does, it generates an energy wave. And I don't know if it's dark enough so you folks can see it out there, but heat generates an energy wave. It generates an energy wave. It's something like this. This is how it travels in space. Now, when you put the heat on the tissue, this energy spectrum is introduced into the tissue. Now, what does this energy spectrum emanating from the heat source does to the tissues? In essence, what molecules do in a tissue, what the body is made up of molecules. Well, how those molecules make the body healthy is that they vibrate in the vicinity where they are located. So when you put the heat on the tissue, the heat generates this energy wave. This energy wave, when it travels into the tissue, basically what it does, it creates vibrations in the molecules which make up the tissues. Molecules in the body, they vibrate, and when the tissue gets traumatized, it loses that vibration. It basically becomes a molecule that's not producing any energy in its environment. So the tissue suffers because of that. So when you introduce this energy spectrum that emanates from the heat, you're creating this vibration in the molecules again. Now, when you do that, what happens is you are generating or you are creating a healing effect inside the tissues. So heat generates an energy wave in space, creates vibrations in the molecules in the tissues that are traumatized, and then that has a healing effect on the tissues. Now, this is a very simplified illustration of the physiology, the biology, the physical principles behind the use of heat and what it does in the tissues themselves. Now, for those folks who are watching out there, you may say, how do you know heat is creating energy waves in space? How can you prove it? Well, the way that I'm going to prove it is I'm going to show you so you can see it with your own eyes, the heat spectrum or the energy spectrum that emanates from a source of heat. And we're going to do that through a device that allows us to see the thermal energy emanating from structures. And if you allow me, I'm going to show you right now so you can see it with your own eyes what I mean about the energy waves. Now, this is a simple hot pack. It's been laying here in the environment for about an hour. So it's cold. It's room temperature. It must be about 70 degrees maybe. Now, what I'm going to show you is, thank you. What I'm going to show you is that heat energy. Now, first, I'm going to show you what a room temperature object, and actually the thermal signature of that object. And then I'm going to show you an object or a structure, a hot pack that's hot. And you'll be able to see what I refer to as that energy spectrum emanating from the hot pack, which when you put on a tissue, on a living tissue, that energy spectrum penetrates the tissue itself, creating vibrations of those molecules, thus creating a healing effect inside the tissues. So you can see with your own eyes what I mean. This is cold. This is room temperature. This is about 70 degrees. It's not cold, it's just room temperature. Now this is the thermal imaging device. Now, you see the outline of the hot pack. You see the background, it's kind of green. It's a solid green. You don't see any fluctuation in the foreground. The green, you see it right there. This is the hot pack. I just put my finger on it. You see the outline very clearly. You see the background. It's green. Now, watch the energy spectrum of a hot pack that's hot. This is about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot enough to produce emanating energy. It's a waveform. It's an energy waveform. Can you observe that pink emanating from the top of the hot pack? I put my finger right on the top. Do you see that? It looks almost like a flame. In essence, it's exactly what it is. It's a flame of energy. You see the spectrum. You see it emanating from the top. That is the energy spectrum. That is a wave that's being dispersed or permeated in space. When you put hot packs or anything that generates heat on a human or a living structure, that energy spectrum is penetrating into the tissues. You can see it very clear, that energy spectrum emanating from this hot pack. That is energy that's traveling in space. It's going out into the universe, basically. But when you put it on a patient, that energy penetrates the tissue, and it creates the molecules to vibrate. Again, reestablishes order inside the tissues. Molecules have to vibrate, they have to move, they're not static, they're dynamic. When a tissue gets traumatized, it becomes stagnant, they lose that vibration. So you have to introduce the energy from the exterior and apply it into the tissues, so the cells can produce the energies themselves. And again, you can see it very clearly. This is the cold. We're seeing the background of the energy. There it goes. You see it. There's no flame-like aura emanating from this hot pack. You see how it is. It's a very uniform background, foreground. Again, here we go with the hot pack. Again, you see the flame-like aura emanating from the hot pack. It's cooling by the second, but you can still see it's still hot enough. It's emanating that spectrum of energy, those wave energies, which I illustrated on the board. And you can see it very clearly. Now, let's go to the patient so we can see the progress. This is the third treatment. As you can see, if you can get closer, so the folks out there can see, those who've seen video A and B, the bruising is totally resolved. There is no more bruising here. Now, she still has this encapsulated area of basically of traumatized, or you can call it degenerative tissue. You can still see it. What I did today is I circumscribed it so you can see it out there. And I measured it from top to bottom and from side to side. It's 2 inches by 2 inches. So from here on, we can actually see the progression of it by simply measuring it. This is the center. You can still see she still has this encapsulated tissue. It's less. It's about 20% less. But we measured it, so now we'll be able to get some objective measurements so we can progress. We can actually see the progression and actually measure it. But you can see the bruising is done. The bruising is complete, is resolved completely, but she's still left with this encapsulated tissue. This is the third treatment. Now I'm going to show you what the biological activity of this space, what it's generating. So if you allow me, I'm going to come over here so you can appreciate it with the... Now, you can see red signifies biological activity. Every time this patient has come, we've always taken a thermal imaging. Now, the difference between this view and the views from the earlier studies, treatments, is that this biological activity is encroaching more on this encapsulated area here. You can see it. So this is actually a good sign because she has biological activity occurring in the traumatized space. So nutrients and energy are beginning to flow through the tissues, and it's consistent. So a healing effect is underway in this tissue. Again, you can see the red is encroaching upon this X. So what we've been able to create thus far is we've been able to create the healing effect inside the tissues. It's running its course. It runs through phases. Now, if you allow me, I'm going to come over here. Now, this is the third treatment. I expect for her to progress substantially after this treatment. There may be a fourth treatment that may be required. We're going to treat today, and then we're going to wait a week and see how much this encapsulated area has resolved. But, like I said, a traumatized tissue progresses through phases. But the important thing is that you have to introduce energy into the tissues. So this paradigm that I'm trying to describe is that heat does more than just loosen muscle. Heat is an energy. It's the simplest energy that you can get your hands on. Anybody can go to any retail store or really anywhere that you can acquire anything that produces heat and use it as an energy source. Now, we saw earlier the energy spectrum that comes from that heat. Now, that energy, when you apply it on the tissues, penetrates into the tissues. So heat, another way you can look at heat is as a regenerative energy that anybody can use. It's very simple to acquire. But what we need to do is we need to start thinking more in terms of energy delivery and less in terms of a tissue being in an inflammatory or a non-inflammatory state. Like I said, ice does have a use in the rehab industry, but ice should be used only immediately after a traumatized tissue, when the tissue is hot, when it is inflamed acutely. But we need to go from ice to heat sooner than what we've been doing thus far. And we've seen what heat can do in this patient. This is only the third treatment. Now, this hip was traumatized quite a bit. It was very bruised. This encapsulated area was much larger than it was now. Now, I do not consider this tissue resolved until this encapsulated area right here resolves completely. So we're going to be treating today, and possibly we're going to be treating one more time. But I think anybody that's watched this progression of this patient, they're starting to understand the new paradigm of heat usage. You got to start thinking of heat as an energy source, an energy that you're delivering into a tissue that's in dire need of an energy that it cannot produce internally, endogenously. So what you need to do is you need to apply energy into the tissues. So we need to start thinking in energy terms and not in inflammatory state terms. Because the whole idea about keeping tissues healthy is to make sure that energy is being delivered and energy is running through the tissue matrix. Like that, the cells can stay vibrating and they can do what they're designed to do. So we're going to be treating this patient today for the third time. We may be seeing her again one more time, and hopefully we'll see you folks out there for the fourth treatment if it's required. Again, if you have any questions, if you have any statements to say about these videos, please contact me on YouTube or just send me a message. Thank you.